Today's topic is one that completely changed the music world. The late 90s and early 2000s was a changing time as digital media became more accessible to young internet users.
Little did we all know, Lars was kind of right. Join us as we uncover this epic story of Metallica versus Napster in the download dispute that shook the music world. By the end of the 1990s, the music industry was riding high on CD sales and MTV music exposure. But a disruptive storm was brewing on the internet. On June 1st, 1999, a 19-year-old college dropout named Sean Fanning, alongside his collaborator Sean Parker, launched a software platform called Napster.
The desktop is essentially like radio. You're going to discover music and play on your friends' profiles. You're going to discover, you can share playlists with your friends. You're going to learn about more new music than you've ever experienced before.
Napster was a peer-to-peer file sharing service that allowed users across the world to share and download specifically MP3 music files directly from one another's hard drives. In effect, it created a vast online library of songs available for free. This novel, enticing proposition spread like wildfire, man. Napster amassed an estimated 80 million registered users globally at its peak. Massive growth from its number of 20 million in just the year 2000.
And because Napster is so new, people are going, wild with it. It's like, it's going into like a candy store. You've got thousands of songs, anything you want, as much as you want.
So kids across the country are bypassing the music store and instead sharing their favorite songs over their computers. But uploading and downloading music like this is demanding of the internet.
The public had discovered that virtually any song could be theirs at the click of a mouse without spending a fucking cent.
Napster's meteoric rise marked the dawn of the digital piracy boom. Before Napster, music piracy had existed in smaller but often physical forms. Bootleg cassette tapes, burned CDs, and even the niche FTP or bulletin board sites. But Napster's easy-to-use interface and massive user base brought music piracy directly into the mainstream. Napster is music at internet speed, boasted the service's website in the year 2000, reflecting how instantly a user could search a song and download it from another Napster user's computer. Millions of tracks became accessible overnight, in an era that most music was still sold on physical discs. The record industry viewed this new Wild West of file sharing as an existential threat, and it was. A potentially lethal challenge to its business model of selling albums one copy at a time.
Despite these initial alarms going off in some corners, not everyone in the music world was immediately taken back by this. In Napster's early days, many saw the internet as a promotional tool rather than a revenue killer. Some artists, such as Dispatch and Radiohead, even embraced the concept of free sharing in the early days to help build their audience. However, for many of the big-time artists and labels, Napster's astronomical growth was a direct attack on their livelihoods. Every Napster download was a sale potentially lost. The Recording Industry Association of America, also known as the RIAA, responded swiftly. In December of '99, 18 different record companies, all members of the RIAA, sued Napster, accusing them of being liable for contributory infringement and vicarious infringement of copyright. At the time, no one really cared. It was the early 2000s. We had better things to do. The fight for Napster really lacked that public face. But that was about to change when one of the world's biggest bands discovered that even their unreleased music was not safe from the internet's reach.
So it sort of showed up on all these radio stations across the country, and we were like, well, how did that happen? And I got a call from our office like the next day. It traces back to something called Napster, and we were like, well, if they're fuck with us, we'll fuck with them.
In the early 2000s, Metallica was a heavy metal juggernaut, still are, riding 2 decades at the time of success. The band, vocalist guitarist James Hetfield, drummer Lars, guitarist Kirk Hammett, and bassist Jason Newsted had built its following through relentless touring and a fiercely loyal fan base. They were also known for a staunchly pro-fan stance, often encouraging those fans to tape live shows, and trade bootlegs for personal use. Metallica, in short, was seen as a band that cared deeply about its music and its listeners, and that image was about to be tested.
It was the spring of 2000. Metallica was finishing their new song, I Disappear. This track was slated for the release of the new soundtrack to Mission Impossible 2. And later that summer, it would be the band's first new material since their divisive Symphony and Metallica release in November of '99. In a surprise to the band, however, unfinished demo versions of I Disappear began surfacing on US radio stations in the early 2000s, well before any official release. Metallica's team was baffled.
Here's how we'd like to release it.
Right.
We don't want it leaked over here. We don't want this happening. We don't,
Right.
you know, a presentation is part of the art. Like when you walk into an art studio, the artist has been in there putting it together. Like, okay, I want you to see this first and then that. And then you go here and you get bam, you know, that there's a passion behind that. And when someone just throws it out there and it's just, it kind of loses an impact.
The source of the leak was quickly traced. An online platform called Napster had somehow gotten hold of the song and made it available to download.
For Metallica, this discovery was a breaking point, and I kind of don't blame them. It wasn't just that a song of theirs had leaked, it was an unfinished work in progress, now being consumed by the masses without context or permission. The band was outraged that their artistic process had been compromised.
It's been a fucking year and a half with this. And it just doesn't seem like we're getting far.
As Lars later put it, the idea that the public could hear an unpolished Metallica track before the band was ready was a fundamental violation. Did the public have the right to hear an unfinished song? In Metallica's view, Napster's users had hijacked their music without asking and taken away the band's control over their own art.
Their response was calculated and aggressive. In April of 2000, the band filed a lawsuit against Napster in the U.S. District Court in their home state of California, accusing the company of copyright infringement, racketeering, and unlawful use of digital audio interface devices. It was a groundbreaking case. Metallica became the first major artist to directly sue a peer-to-peer file sharing service. In the press release announcing the suit, Metallica emphasized the principle at stake. "We take our craft very seriously," the band stated, decrying that their art was being traded like a commodity rather than the art that it is. From a business standpoint, they said, "This is about piracy, taking something that doesn't belong to you and that is morally and legally wrong."
Behind the scenes, the initial mindset within the band was combative. Lars, in particular, spearheaded Metallica's charge against Napster.
Like the next day, it traces back to something called Napster, and we were like, well, if they're fuck with us, we'll fuck with them. And then it sort of turned into it started off a street fight. And then like a month later, it was like, whoa.
Lars later recounted the band's mentality when they learned of the leak. What started, in his words, as a back alley street fight to defend Metallica's turf soon exploded into something way bigger.
Their lawsuit targeted not only Napster itself, but also took the extraordinary step of identifying individual users of the program. Metallica hired online consulting group NetPD to monitor the Napster network for 48 hours. That was it. Upon which they compiled a list of every user who was sharing Metallica songs. The band identified nearly 335,000 user IDs that the band said were illegally trading their music. This dramatic gesture was taken on by Ulrich himself, dumping the 60,000-page list of Napster usernames right on the company's doorstep in Silicon Valley. It was meant to challenge Napster's claim that it couldn't identify infringing users. Napster, faced with this public broadside, quickly banned those users from its service, complying with Metallica's demand that they be shut off.
This aggressive strike by Metallica sent shockwaves through the music community. Metallica had drawn a line in the sand, man. They were willing to go after not just Napster, but anyone downloading their songs without permission. What had been a growing legal issue was now an all-out war between a band and its own fans, or at least that's how it was perceived.
On July 11th, 2000, Lars Ulrich exchanged his drum stool for a witness seat in Washington, D.C., appearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee during hearings on music on the internet. Seated in a panel alongside musicians like the Byrds' Roger McGinn, industry figures, and Napster's CEO Hank Barry, Ulrich gave a prepared statement that forcefully articulated Metallica's position.
Napster hijacked our music without asking.
Dressed in black and speaking with passion, the Danish-born drummer recounted his American dream, coming to the U.S. as a teenager, forming Metallica, and rising from poverty to achieve success through hard work. That dream, he argued, was now under threat from this company, Napster.
He described how in just 48 hours of monitoring Napster, Metallica found 300,000 users that had downloaded 1.4 million of the band's songs for free.
If you're not fortunate enough to own a computer, there's only one way to assemble a music collection, the equivalent of a Napster user's: theft. Walk into a record store, grab what you want, and walk out.
And to illustrate this point, he painted a vivid analogy. In other words, downloading songs without paying was no different than shoplifting CDs.
Downloading music is the same thing as going into a CD store.
The only difference was that Napster's technology made the theft invisible and seemingly consequence-free. In the hearing room, as cameras clicked, Lars held up Napster as a symbol of an anything-goes internet that could destroy the livelihoods of artists not as financially secure as Metallica.
Most artists are barely earning a decent wage and need every source of revenue available to scrape by. The music industry is not viable. Musicians should not work for free. Nobody else works for free. Why should musicians?
Lars' testimony hammered home that Metallica's fight was fundamentally about artistic control and fairness. His stern, accented voice filled the chamber as he concluded that Metallica wasn't against music being shared, as long as the artist had a say in the matter. To emphasize that point, he explained, "I don't have a problem with any artist voluntarily distributing his or her songs through any means that the artist chooses, but we should decide what happens to our music, not a company with no rights in our recordings." It was ultimately about the band's right to control its own creations.
But despite his insistence that it was not about greed, many fans and fellow musicians just flat out didn't buy it. We were part of that camp when we were younger.
We were.
The backlash was about to kick into high gear, painting Metallica not as just protectors of art, but as vindictive rock stars out of touch with their own fans.
When the news broke that Metallica was suing Napster and targeting individual users, I think that was really the straw that broke it, a firestorm of anger erupted from their fan base. The band members who once could do no wrong in the eyes of many metalheads were suddenly being called sellouts, traitors, even greedy rock and roll capitalists. The term metallicash started circulating as a mockery of the band's perceived motives. In chat rooms, on music forums, and at concerts, disgruntled listeners vented that Metallica had forgotten the fans that made them famous. After all, this was a band that rose to prominence by leveraging the underground tape trading scene in the 80s. Now, to some, it looked like Metallica was criminalizing the 21st century version of the same fan-driven sharing. An act of utter hypocrisy. As one college student griped to the press at the time, "I guess Metallica doesn't want us to hear their music unless we pay them for it. They've got enough money. Why sue us poor college kids?"
That backlash took many forms, too. Perhaps most infamously, Metallica became the butt of jokes and parody in pop culture at the time. At the 2000 MTV Music Video Awards that September, just months after the lawsuit, Lars agreed to participate in a self-deprecating comedy sketch that was meant to show that he could poke fun at himself.
Hey, frat boy. What the hell do you think you're doing, man?
Holy crap! Do you know who you are? You're freaking Lars Ulrich from Metallica!
The show's host, comedian Marlon Wayans, appeared in a pre-taped skit as a college student in a dorm room downloading Metallica's music on Napster. The attempted humor backfired. That same night, Napster's co-founder, Sean Fanning, made a surprise appearance on the VMA stage wearing a Metallica t-shirt. When MTV VJ Carson Daly complimented Fanning's shirt, Fanning slyly replied, "Thank you, I borrowed it from a friend," twisting the knife with Napster's ethos of sharing. As Fanning introduced a performance by Britney Spears, the audience erupted, and notably, Lars was booed by sections of the crowd when he later came on stage to present an award.
Napster. Sharing's only fun when it's not your stuff.
If MTV's spectacle wasn't humiliating enough, the rock and metal community piled on with their own jabs. A wave of underground flash cartoons, some of my favorite, I'm so glad that you put these on here. Some of these underground flash cartoons and comedy sketches lampooned Metallica's fight against Napster in one widely shared satirical flash animation titled Napster Bad!
And like $100 for a genuine Metallica cock ring. You're all fucking awesome, and we'll never forget you. You fucking made us rich.
Cartoon versions of Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield were depicted as money-grubbing buffoons willing to sue anyone who hummed a Metallica riff without payment.
This crude internet humor, one of my favorites, captured the sentiment coursing through many fans at the time that Metallica's millionaire rock stars were attacking everyday music lovers over pettiness. The band that once wrote anthems about anti-establishment rebellion was now, in the eyes of some, the establishment. Fat Cat rockers defending an outdated system.
Other musicians openly sided against Metallica, framing the issue as Metallica versus the fans. Ironically enough, however, Metallica found themselves with some unlikely allies in their corner. Dr. Dre stood with the metal band. He had also sued Napster shortly after Metallica did, demanding his songs be removed. But they were lonely voices among their peers. Popular acts at the time like Limp Bizkit and The Offspring saw an opportunity to score points with fans by embracing Napster. Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst not only defended the software, but he partnered with the company to put on a free tour in the summer of 2000, funded by Napster as a PR move. Durst called Napster a great way to promote music and shrugged off Metallica's complaints.
Amid this public dogpile, few artists publicly defended Metallica. Lars noted later that many musicians thanked him privately for taking on Napster, but were being pussies about saying so in public.
But there were other artists that would show up at shows saying, "Hey man, I'm really glad you're doing what you're doing." It's like, come on, join us. "Oh no, I can't." oh, no, my career would be over. It's like, you fuck, it's so frustrating. It's like, dude, do you believe in it? Yeah. Then stand up. It's like, yeah, but no, it'll fall apart. Something will happen. My fans, blah, blah, blah. So they were concerned about their own careers and not the big picture of artists. And obviously these days you can see.
I get that. That would be frustrating to me too. One vocal argument, seemingly in Metallica's favor, came from veteran rapper Chuck D of Public Enemy, who framed Napster as a modern-day radio and chastised the industry for not adapting. Courtney Love also spoke out, not exactly to defend Metallica, but to argue that record labels were the bigger villains, exploiting artists far more than Napster did. But these nuanced takes were drowned out by the overwhelming narrative that Metallica was in the wrong side of history, fighting progress and alienating their own fan base. And it's funny how a lot of this mirrors what's going on today.
But at that time, the backlash manifested in tangible ways. Metallica CD sales dipped in some markets, and anecdotal reports surfaced of fans organizing boycotts, refusing to buy Metallica's merchandise or attend concerts that they normally would as a protest. Metallica insisted that their quarrel was not with genuine fans trading live tapes or enjoying their music. It was with an unregulated platform that was seemingly out of control. The band drew a distinction between old school fan bootlegging, which they had long tolerated, and wholesale piracy of studio recordings, some of which weren't even available at the time. What angered them was that Napster made Metallica's entire studio catalog, every song, available globally without permission or payment. To upset fans, Metallica's nuance sounded like an excuse. The perception was that the band had changed from the rebellious underdogs of heavy metal to rich rock stars trying to put the genie of digital freedom right back in the bottle. We were blindsided by how ugly it got, Lars recalled, saying that Metallica was unprepared for the PR shitstorm that came their way.
I mean, we were always consider ourselves to be part of the edge in terms of technology, and we've always been very open about sort of investing everything that we had financially back into the band. So when people called us greedy and money hungry and all of that, that was a little bit out there.
And that's where we get to the legal showdown. While the public relations battle raged, the legal case continued in court. Napster fought to keep its service alive even as judges increasingly sided against it. In July 2000, a federal judge issued a preliminary injunction ordering Napster to block the trading of copyrighted music by major labels. On July 2nd in 2001, Napster was forced to shut down its entire network, pending further compliance. The music stopped.
Just days later, however, Napster moved to make peace with its most prominent adversaries. On July 12th, 2001, Napster announced that it settled the lawsuits with Metallica and Dr. Dre. Under the deal, Napster agreed to permanently block access to any Metallica or Dre songs on its network, and the artists would drop their legal claims. There was no public mention of a cash payout, but by that point, Napster was cash poor anyway. But Metallica hailed the outcome as a victory of principle. Lars himself said in a statement,
I think we've resolved this in a way that works for fans, recording artists, and songwriters alike.
Crucially, he reiterated Metallica's real point.
Beef hasn't been the concept of sharing music. The problem we had with Napster was that they never asked us or other artists if we wanted to participate in their business.
In Metallica's eyes, the settlement forced Napster to respect the enhanced protection for artists that the band had been seeking all along.
Yet, as the dust settled, it became apparent that although Metallica won in court, they couldn't stop the tide of technology. One company might be stopped in their tracks, but attempting to stem the march of progress is like trying to stop the wind. Indeed, the very shutdown of Napster gave rise to other file sharing tools. Former Napster users migrated to decentralized platforms like Nutella, Kazaa, Morpheus, LimeWire, the list goes on. These services had no central servers, making it even harder to isolate and identify individual users. As Kirk later himself conceded to Rolling Stone magazine,
we didn't make a difference. We did not make a difference. Couldn't stop it because it was just bigger than any of us. This trend that happened that sunk the music industry.
The genie was out of the bottle. The notion that music wants to be free had taken hold of a generation.
However, Napster's demise wasn't entirely in vain. It served as a wake-up call for the growing tech industry to innovate new business models. In 2001, as they were dying, Apple's Steve Jobs took advantage of the moment, negotiating deals with labels to launch the iTunes Music Store, which debuted in 2003. This was a convenient and legal download service. The success of iTunes showed that many consumers were willing to pay trillions of dollars if they were reasonably priced and the files were easy to get. By the late 2000s, attention shifted to early iterations of streaming music. First, you got YouTube, which was launched in 2005, and then you have dedicated music streaming services and platforms like Pandora, which launched in 2000, nearly in conjunction with Napster, and Spotify, one of the biggest today, which launched in 2006, and they changed the landscape of digital music entirely.
Napster's collapse arguably paved the way for all of these platforms. It controlled the legal version of what Napster had pioneered. In an ironic full circle, Napster's co-founder, Sean Parker, became an early investor in Spotify, helping broker deals to get Spotify off the ground in the late 2000s.
You have Spotify, and you've said that it is your life's mission to complete what you didn't complete with Napster.
Well, Napster was an interesting company, because it succeeded more as a revolution in music and in distribution than as a company. Actually, as a business, it was a failure. Because we did it, Sean Fanning and I founded the company because we love music. And we felt like internet offered an enormous opportunity to change distribution of music and get more music out to more people in the world.
The free-for-all of piracy gradually gave way to the monthly unlimited streaming model that just dominates today.
It has now been over 2 decades since Metallica's war with Napster, and the episode's impact on music and culture, man, we're still feeling it. In hindsight, many of the key players, including members of Metallica, they've reflected on what the Napster saga meant. The fight raised fundamental questions that remain relevant. How should artists be compensated in the digital age?
I'm all for convenience in the technology moving forward. Getting music out to people is the important part. But just make sure the artist gets what they deserve from it.
Who controls art once it's released into cyberspace? And how did the public's perception of artists shift in an era of file sharing and streaming?
For Metallica, there's no denying the legal scuffle with Napster left a scar on the public image, especially at the time. Over time, as the music industry continued to transform, some critics softened their stance on the band's actions, and by today, I would say that they've mostly recovered from it. By the 2010s, a reappraisal had begun. Maybe Lars was right, went into the think pieces and social media posts, noting that streaming hadn't exactly been a boon for artists' incomes, and it still isn't. Musicians who laughed off Metallica's warnings started acknowledging that the band had a point.
For technology, and it's interesting with the exchange of music, but the way that it's set up right now is theft, basically, pure and simple. And I mean, it's tough to take that stance as a musician and not sound like a rich guy trying to get richer. But the bottom line is people stealing what you spend a lot of time and effort and money to create. And I can't support that.
As recently as 2022, Metallica's own Kirk Hammett remarked on the World of Wheeler,
"If there's anything I regret that no one else supported us during that Napster time. I don't even know if you can call it a regret. Maybe it's more of a disappointment. I was very disappointed that other musicians who saw our point, they supported us in ways that were less inconvenient to them. We stuck our necks out there. At the end of the day, I'd like to say what we were doing had some merit, some truth to it."
In fact, Kirk maintained on a Swedish TV show,
"The whole Napster thing didn't do us any favors whatsoever. But you know what? We're still in the right on that. We're still right about Napster. No matter who's out there saying Metallica was wrong. All you have to do is look at the state of the music industry. And that explains the whole situation right there."
Declining album sales in the 20 years after Napster, he implied, vindicates the band's alarm at the changing music environment.
Other rockers have come to Metallica's defense. Corey Taylor of Slipknot, speaking in 2023, revealed,
"I remember everyone giving him so much shit because of that, and he was so right on so many fucking levels, dude. It's scary. And I wonder how many people look back and eat a little crow because of that. Because he knew that this was the direction we were going."
He lamented that streaming services pay peanuts to artists, and that if more people had stood with Metallica in 2000, well, maybe things would be a little different. Mike Portnoy, the former Dream Theater drummer, echoed the sentiment, saying that in 2021, that Lars was right about Napster in retrospect, and that the vilification he received just wasn't fair.
Lars has spoken at length in recent years about what he learned from the Napster debacle. In a Rolling Stone interview, he conceded that Metallica could have handled it differently.
"I learned that the thing I love about Metallica is that we're very impulsive. That impulsivity occasionally bites us in the ass. With Napster, we jump straight down to, F these guys, let's go after them." I underestimated what Napster meant to people in terms of freedom it represented.
But he also suggested that if he could turn back time, they might have tried to educate themselves better about what the other side was thinking. In hindsight, Napster was a symbol of youth rebellion, and Metallica's hardline approach failed to account for that symbolism until it was way too late. The damage had already been incorporated. Lars reflected wryly in this 2016 Rolling Stone article with Corey Groh.
"So I think that sometimes, even if you don't want to, you gotta kinda just do a little bit of due diligence before you jump. At least have an idea of where you think you're gonna land, you know?"
He also acknowledged that the Napster fight will always be part of his legacy, unfortunately. It'll be in the first 5 sentences of my obituary, and I sort of accept that.
A study cited in 2020 found that 76% of all music consumption is now streaming rather than purchases, with the average per stream payment under half a penny, basically, is what it comes out to be. Such statistics have led some younger artists to echo Metallica's 2000 argument. If music is free, or practically free, how can most musicians survive by doing this?
And you got AI now, so it's even worse.
Great.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the public perception of Metallica has gradually recovered. The vitriol of 2000 has cooled into a historical footnote, albeit one that has always been attached to the band's legacy. Metallica themselves even joke about it now on their 2017 tour, an onstage video interlude featuring a cheeky Napster logo appearance, drawing laughs from the crowd who once booed.
So whose choice is it really?
And what can we learn?
Reflecting on the Metallica versus Napster saga, one is struck by how it encapsulated a pivotal moment of transition. Looking around today's music landscape, much of what transpired in the wake of Napster validates both sides of the argument. Fans did gain unprecedented access to music. Virtually every song is available at our fingertips on YouTube or Spotify or one of the thousands of streaming services, fulfilling Napster's vision of a world where music flows freely like a little butterfly. But Metallica's warnings about the economic fallout are also prescient. The recorded music industry shrank dramatically in the 2000s, and only in recent years has it been able to rebound, largely, again, due to streaming subscriptions.
Any full telling of Metallica's legacy will include that chapter where the biggest metal band on the planet took on a tech upstart and millions of its users, and in doing so, ignited a worldwide conversation about art, technology, and entitlement. Metallica emerged bruised but unbound. As they're still selling out stadiums decades later, their legendary status firmly intact.
Napster, as it was originally known, was a flash in the pan, a blip on the radar in the exponentially growing tech industry, but it forever changed how we experience music. And the ripple effects of Metallica versus Napster are still felt every time we hit play on a streaming app or contemplate how to support the artists we love. As Metallica might say, the memory remains, and from it, we keep on learning.
What'd y'all think? Thumbs up the video, really helps us out.
Go with the gods, Forge mates. Saint Anger is watching over you.